What if the man everyone feared was the only one who could save her? That question echoed in Olive Matthews' heart long before she ever met the mountain man people whispered about in Cedar Ridge. 6 months earlier, the last autumn leaves clung to the thin branches outside the small general store Olive ran alone. The wind was cold, and it seemed to slip through every crack in the building. Olive stood behind the counter, counting the coins in the till again. Her fingers shook each time she reached the same painful result. It was never enough. No matter how carefully she counted, the money could not cover the debts her late husband had left behind. The bell above the door rang sharply. Mrs. Henderson stepped inside with her usual stiff posture and judging eyes. Her gaze traveled from Olive's worn dress to her tired face. She didn't bother to hide her disapproval. "I suppose you've heard about the Williamson place," Mrs. Henderson said, walking to the counter. "They're looking for a wife for their hired hand. Though I don't expect any decent woman to consider such an idea." Quote, Olive's heart jumped. She had heard the rumors everyone had. The Williamson Ranch sat near the base of the mountains, far from town, and the man who worked there almost never came down to Cedar Ridge. People whispered that he was dangerous, that he had a violent past, and that something was wrong with him. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to seem dramatic. "They say he's been up there for years. Some think he's running from the law. Others believe he left trouble behind. A man living like that must have darkness in him." The coins slipped from Olive's hand and clattered on the counter. She didn't know what shocked her more, the rumors or the small spark inside her that wondered if any part of the story was true. She had been married once. Her late husband had been kind but poor at business. When he passed away, he left Olive with nothing but debts and a failing store to hold together. At 26, the town saw her as a widow with no family, no future, and no real value. Mrs. Henderson smoothed her skirt, pretending to sound casual. "Of course, the pay they're offering is generous, enough to clear debts and still have a comfortable life. But honestly, better to lose everything with dignity than tie yourself to a man like that." That night, Olive locked the store and climbed the stairs to her tiny room above. She pressed her forehead to the cold window and looked at the dark mountains in the distance. Snow dusted the peaks, glowing under the moonlight. The idea of becoming a mountain man's wife, someone no one wanted, felt frightening. But so did losing everything she had left. By morning, her last piece of hope was taken from her. Mr. Pettigrew, the bank manager, arrived with papers that made Olive's knees weak. He spoke kindly, but the words crushed her. "I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Matthews, but unless the debt is paid soon, the bank must take the store." After he left, Olive sat alone behind the counter. The shelves, the coffee smell, the wooden floors. This store was the last piece of her old life. Soon it would be gone. The town would look at her with pity, whisper behind her back, and forget her the moment she disappeared. Later that day, Olive found herself walking to the edge of town, without fully knowing why. The mountains called to her like a distant promise. The October air was sharp, and the road leading up the hill seemed to point straight toward the Williamson Ranch. She didn't expect to hear wagon wheels behind her. She turned to see old Jake Morrison, a kind man who often delivered supplies. He slowed his wagon when he saw her. "Mrs. Matthews," he called out gently, "you're far from town. Everything all right?" Olive tried to smile. Just needed some air. "It's a beautiful day." Jake studied her with the experience of someone who had lived long enough to see suffering in others. After a moment of silence, he spoke carefully. "I'm heading up to the Williamson place. If you'd like to ride along, you're welcome. Good country up there. Might clear your mind." His offer felt like a lifeline, like the universe giving her a chance to see for herself instead of believing gossip. She knew he understood her situation. News of her debt was no secret. Olive swallowed the knot of fear in her throat. "I think I'd like that ride." The wagon moved slowly higher into the foothills. Pine trees surrounded them, and the air grew fresh and clean. Sunlight slipped between branches, leaving patches of golden light dancing across the road. For a long time, neither spoke. At last, Jake cleared his throat. "That man working up there, he's not what people make him out to be." Olive turned to him. "What do you mean?" "I've brought supplies to that ranch for years," Jake said. "Never seen him raise his voice. Never seen him treat anyone with anything but respect. He's big and quiet, that's true, and he keeps to himself. But there's a gentleness in him most folks never look long enough to notice." Olive didn't reply, but something inside her shifted. A small spark of curiosity, and maybe hope. The road turned, and suddenly the Williamson Ranch appeared before them. The log house stood warm and welcoming, smoke rising from the chimney. The yard was clean, the fences neat, and everything looked cared for with patience and pride. But then Olive saw him. A tall man stepped out of the barn. Broad shoulders, strong build, hair dark with a touch of silver near his temples. His beard was trimmed and clean, but it was his eyes that held her still. Deep brown, filled with a sadness she felt in her chest. Not anger, not danger, sadness. He walked toward the wagon with slow, steady steps. When he reached them, he removed his hat with quiet respect. "Afternoon, Jake," he said in a calm, deep voice. "I see you brought a visitor." Jake got down first. "This is Mrs. Matthews from town. Olive, this here is Logan Pierce." Olive met Logan's eyes, and in that moment the stories fell away. This was not a monster. Not a criminal. Not a violent man. This was someone who carried a heavy heart. And for the first time in months, Olive felt something that was not fear or worry. She felt a spark of possibility. Olive stepped into the warm kitchen of the Williamson house, guided by Mrs. Williamson, who insisted she call her Martha. The house felt like a different world from the cold fear that lived in town gossip. The floors were polished, quilts added color to the walls, and the air smelled of fresh bread and wood smoke. It felt like a home built with care, love, and hard work. As they sat at the table with tea, Martha watched Olive with thoughtful eyes. "I suppose you've heard the talk," she said with a small, knowing smile. "Town can't mind its business when it comes to our Logan." Olive nodded slowly. "I've heard things." Martha snorted. "Nonsense and gossip. That boy out there is the kindest soul I've known. Hard worker. Loyal. Would give you the shirt off his back in a snowstorm. But he's lonely. Terribly lonely." Through the window, Olive saw Logan gently lifting a horse's hoof, checking it with calm patience. The horse trusted him completely. That simple scene told her more about the man than any rumor ever could. Martha continued, her voice softer now. "Logan came here with a broken heart, lost his wife and his little girl in a fire. After that, he wandered from place to place until a storm nearly froze him to death. My husband, Arthur, found him, brought him here, and he's been with us since. He works hard, but no one should carry that kind of hurt alone." That evening, Logan joined them for dinner. He didn't say much, but his presence filled the room. His voice was deep but gentle when he asked Olive about her life in town. She told him about the store, about her late husband, and how she had been trying to keep going. Logan listened carefully, his eyes never leaving her face, and for the first time in a long while she felt heard. After dinner, Martha excused herself, leaving Olive and Logan in the quiet of the parlor. Logan stared at the fire for a long moment and spoke softly. "Martha told you about my family." "Yes," Olive replied, her voice filled with sympathy. His jaw tightened. "I failed them. I should have been home. Should have protected them." Olive stood and walked closer, her voice gentle. "You loved them. You didn't fail. Grief isn't a sin, Logan." Quote. He looked at her then, and the pain in his eyes was raw and deep. But Olive saw something else too. A man who needed forgiveness, not only from others, but from himself. Before she could find more words, Jake appeared at the door to take her back to town. Logan walked her outside, and the cold night air wrapped around them. For a moment, they simply stood there. "It was good meeting you, Mrs. Matthews," Logan said quietly. "You too, Mr. Pierce," she replied, but her heart felt heavy as she climbed into the wagon. All the way back to Cedar Ridge, Olive replayed every moment of her visit. The quiet house, the peace of the mountains, Martha's warm smile, and Logan's sad eyes stayed with her. By morning, news spread fast. Olive was seen riding to the Williamson ranch, and Mrs. Henderson wasted no time visiting the store to voice her judgment. "I hope you're not thinking of marrying that man," she said, her tone sharp. "People will talk. They already are." Olive stood straighter than she had in months. People always talk when a woman chooses what's best for herself. "Mrs." Henderson's eyes narrowed. "Marrying a mountain hermit out of desperation is not wise." "It isn't desperation to want a life where I'm treated with kindness," Olive replied firmly. The other woman left stiffly. But something had changed inside Olive. She no longer felt small. She felt strong enough to choose her own future. That afternoon, Olive locked the store early. She could no longer let fear and debts hold her back. She rented a horse, and despite warnings of a coming storm, she rode into the mountains toward the Williamson ranch. Snow began to fall as she reached the property. Logan rushed from the barn as she dismounted, worry written on his face. "Mrs. Matthews, you shouldn't be out in this weather." Olive stepped closer. Snowflakes clung to her hair and coat. Her heart pounded, but she did not look away. "I came to give you my answer," she said, her voice steady. "My answer is yes. If you'll have me, I'll marry you." Logan stared at her, stunned. Snow fell around them, the world silent except for the wind. His voice shook when he finally spoke. "Are you sure? I don't have much to offer except hard work and a quiet life." Olive reached up and touched his cheek. "Kindness is worth more than anything money can buy." "And you're good, Logan. Anyone can see that." A breath left him like he had been holding it for years. Martha rushed out onto the porch with a blanket. "Get inside, both of you," she said, smiling wide. "No one makes life-changing decisions in a snowstorm. At least take them by the fire." That night, with the storm raging outside, Olive and Logan sat close at the table, making quiet plans. Logan promised they would take things slow and learn each other's hearts. Olive felt a peace she had not known since her husband's death. In that warm kitchen, surrounded by the sound of crackling fire and Martha's gentle humming, Olive realized she had found something she thought she would never feel again. Hope. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. The storm lasted 3 full days. The wind howled outside the windows, snow piled high against the porch, and the ranch was wrapped in a quiet, white world. Inside, the house felt warm and safe. Those days changed everything between Olive and Logan. They spent time talking, working together, and sharing stories. Logan read aloud by the fire in the evenings, his deep voice steady and comforting. He even helped bake bread when Martha's hands ached, kneading dough with surprising skill and care. Olive began to see the man behind the sadness, a man who had so much love to give but had no one to give it to. When the storm cleared, Logan rode with Olive back to Cedar Ridge to collect her things. The small town watched them closely, whispers following them from every shop window. Some people smiled, others judged. But Olive no longer cared. Logan stood beside her the entire time, calm and steady, his quiet presence shielding her from the stares. With his help, she paid off the debts and closed the chapter of her old life. When they returned to the ranch, the mountain air felt like a new beginning. The months that followed were peaceful and full of growth. Olive learned the ranch work with determination. She fed chickens, tended the garden, sewed, cleaned, and helped Martha with chores. And every day she grew closer to Logan. He showed his love in small ways. A shawl around her shoulders when she was cold, a hand steadying her as they crossed the pasture, or a wildflower left by her plate at breakfast. When spring returned, the small wedding took place in the parlor. Reverend Williams married them with Martha as the only witness. Logan's kiss was gentle and full of emotion, sealing a promise that felt stronger than the mountains around them. Their first night as husband and wife was tender and filled with warmth. Logan treated her with such care that Olive felt cherished in a way she never had before. They spoke quietly into the night, sharing dreams and hopes. When he finally whispered, "I love you," she said it back with her whole heart. Life settled into a steady rhythm. Olive and Logan became true partners in everything. She learned the books and helped manage the ranch's business while Logan worked the land. Martha watched them with pride. One summer evening, she told them she wanted to sign the ranch over to them. It had been Arthur's dream, and now she wanted them to carry it forward. The ranch thrived under their care, but peace never lasts forever in the Wild West. One autumn, word reached the ranch that cattle thieves were targeting nearby ranches. Logan agreed to help the sheriff set a trap. Olive didn't like it, but she understood why he had to go. The night before he left, they lay close together, both pretending to be brave. She begged him to promise he would not risk his life foolishly. He promised he would return to her. Logan rode out with a small herd to lure the thieves. Days passed. Storm clouds gathered. Olive tried to stay busy, but fear gnawed at her heart. On the third night, just as the sun dipped behind the mountains, horses approached the ranch. Olive ran to the window, expecting Logan. Instead, she heard rough voices, voices filled with cruelty. 5 men rode into the yard, guns visible, eyes cold. They were the cattle rustlers, and they were here. Martha grabbed her shotgun. Olive took another. They locked the doors and braced themselves. The thieves kicked the door open, expecting fear. What they found were 2 armed women, standing firm. The leader sneered. "Where's that mountain man of yours? We'll be taking your cattle and anything else we want." "You'll take nothing from this home," Olive said, steady and fearless. The standoff was tense and wild. Gunshots rang through the house, windows shattered, and smoke filled the rooms. Olive and Martha fought with everything they had, refusing to give up the ranch, their home. Just when ammunition was running low, a shout tore through the chaos. Logan's voice. He and the sheriff's men charged into the yard. The thieves were caught between both sides and quickly surrendered. Logan rushed into the house, fear and relief on his face. He pulled Olive into his arms. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice shaking. "We're fine," she whispered against his chest. "We protected our home." Quote, the sheriff looked at Olive with respect. "Ma'am, I've seen hardened men with less courage. You fought like a warrior." Later, as the house quieted and calm returned, Martha spoke with pride. "This ranch stands because all 3 of us fought for it. Together." Time passed, and the ranch continued to prosper. Olive and Logan worked side by side, stronger than ever. Their love only deepened with each season. On their first anniversary, they rode up to the ridge where Logan once showed her the view of the valley. He slipped his arm around her as the sunset painted the sky. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Olive smiled, placing her hand on her belly where a new life was growing, their child. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." They walked home, hand in hand, knowing they had built something that would last. Olive had once been a widow with no future. Logan had been a broken man with no hope. Together, they found love, strength, and a new life. Nobody wanted to be his wife, until she looked past the rumors and saw the mountain man's gentle heart. And in loving him, she found her own.